hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. Do the efforts of President Donald Trump on the Korean Peninsula deserve a prize? As you almost all will recall, our last president was given a Nobel Prize, admittedly for doing nothing. It was the ultimate, we're betting on the come here, drawing to an inside straight when the Nobel Committee decided to award Barack Obama a Nobel Prize. They later came to regret that as they saw all the blood he shed on the African continent and in the Persian Gulf, North Africa in particular. Donald Trump has gone a different route, and he's actually come up with a result that no one really expected. Now, I want to start with this because back in September, our good friend and well-whooped presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, still trying to make herself relevant after her just stunning defeat, went on CBS Sunday program and had this to say about what Trump was doing in North Korea. You can remember that was around the time when you had all of the bluster and all of the threats flying back and forth and people getting very nervous. These were her comments on CBS's Sunday program on the 10th of September.
If we look at the country itself, we can't do it in a vacuum apart from the world. You know, the situation in North Korea is very dangerous. And I think what we've had coming out of the president is incoherent. He attacks our ally, South Korea. He doesn't seem to understand or have the people around him who can lead a very focused diplomatic effort to try to get the Chinese, Japanese, South Koreans all on the same page when it comes to North Korea and their nuclear program.
Do you think we're going to be okay?
Sitting here, I don't see a plan or a strategy other than the military talk that I hear from the president and from the generals. That's their job. They are representatives of our Defense Department. I don't hear much out of the Secretary of State. There's nobody in the administration who's being elevated to be the envoy to Korea who maybe speaks the language, or to China, maybe speaks the language. I was proud to be Secretary of State for 4 years. We had the most talented, dedicated Foreign Service officers. They are being decimated. So where will the diplomacy come from? And when you tweet as your diplomatic strategy, that confuses people. And frankly, I think both with Kim Jong-un and with Putin, some of what Trump has said has played right into their interests. they must be smiling when they see some of his tweets. He's getting played by Putin and Kim Jong-un, and I'm not sure he understands that, but it has repercussions for our future security.
Donald Trump does not understand. Donald Trump is being played. I was proud to be Secretary of State for 4 years. What did you accomplish on the Korean Peninsula in 4 years, Mrs. Clinton? I think you left that situation pretty much unchanged from how you found it, and we know the man for whom you worked did absolutely nothing there of consequence. Hillary wasn't done on September 10th. She went on The View on the 13th to continue her criticism of the current administration that she wanted to have been her own, at least in time. She just can't accept losing and that somebody else is in the job that she so coveted.
North Korea, this is a very serious issue. And what I am most critical of is that you cannot deal with North Korea unless you work with our allies, South Korea and Japan, and you move China as much as possible, right? So it doesn't help for the president on Twitter to insult South Korea. That is not useful in our trying to bring people together to deal with what is a very serious threat to our own national security.
I don't know what is worse, listening to Hillary Clinton talk about what should happen in foreign policy as though she has any foreign policy accomplishments aside from riding around on an airplane, or listening to a crowd of ignorant individuals applaud her comments. However, I can't blame them entirely because the American media dumbs down everybody. They don't tell people what's going on. So I had to go back and look at the Times of Oman, which I don't know that many people read or watch their video productions, but I do have a video from the Times of Oman talking about how South Korea and others viewed Trump's handling of North Korea. This is from January 10th.
North Korea's reckless pursuit.
A surprising approval for Donald Trump's hard line on North Korea from the South. President Moon Jae-in said Wednesday Trump's fire and fury threats for Kim Jong-un might have done its job.
I think President Trump deserves big credit for bringing the inter-Korean talks.
The two Koreas held talks on Tuesday for the first time in more than 2 years, where the North agreed to hold military talks with the South and sent a large delegation to the Winter Olympics next month. Washington raised concerns the talks were a ploy to drive a wedge between itself and Seoul, but on Wednesday, Moon said his government takes the same view as the U.S. on how to respond to the North's threats, and warned Pyongyang could face even tougher sanctions if provocations continue. The North, for its part, made it clear in talks its weapons program isn't up for discussion, but any South Korean worried about missiles can relax.
Regarding the nuclear issues, our strategic weapons, including the atomic bomb, hydrogen bomb, and intercontinental ballistic missiles, are only aimed at the United States, not our brethren.
Still, Washington welcomed Tuesday's talks as a first step towards solving the nuclear crisis, and the U.S. State Department said it would even be interested in joining future talks. There may be an opportunity for that. More talks are slated for the two Koreas before the Pyeongchang Olympics next month.
South Korea learned from the Trump administration how to deal with the threats from North Korea. Isn't that special? He thinks that Donald Trump deserves not credit, not a little credit, big credit for bringing these talks about. North Korea, speaking publicly what they normally say privately about South Korea being our brethren, which is, of course, the appeal of all of this. At the end of the day, the line between North Korea and South Korea is basically a line arbitrarily drawn on the ground, the 37th parallel. It is not a line among the people. They are the same blood. They are the same ethnicity. They are one people. But they didn't know how to get there. This was back in January, so you still hear a bunch of bluster from South Korea. From North Korea, excuse me. About, well, the missiles are pointed at the United States, but not. We already dealt with that. If you fire on the United States, you will be destroyed. That statement didn't go anywhere. It didn't go away. So we have all this back and forth. South Korea said, oh, Trump has it right. We give him big credit for helping us understand how to respond to South Korea. And then this past Friday, April 27th, ABC News filed this report.
North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un stepping across the border into South Korea. Here's the moment. A short time later, both leaders then stepped back into North Korea. It was really something to witness as the world was watching. Both declaring that the war is over, and what President Trump said late today with his face-to-face meeting coming next. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran in South Korea.
High drama in the DMZ. Kim Jong-un emerging from North Korea. His phalanx of bodyguards slips away and he strides alone to the border. A warm handshake with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. And then with that step, Kim makes history. The first North Korean leader to set foot on South Korean territory. Unscripted, the two leaders then cross back into the north, as if to show that fearsome border is just a line on the ground. This summit marked by pageantry. The men introducing their wives. Kim Jong-un's wife, all smiles. In the end, the two leaders promising to sign a peace treaty this year, formally ending the Korean War and pledging the denuclearization of the peninsula, sealing the deal with a bear hug. We are one nation, Kim declared. But beyond this summit, the family of American Otto Warmbier reminding the world of the brutal nature of Kim's regime, filing a lawsuit this week accusing North Korea of the torture and murder of their son in a North Korean prison. And in Washington, President Trump, whose tough talk about fire and fury changed the dynamic here, now optimistically looking forward to his own meeting with Kim.
I'll be watching people that failed so badly over the last 25 years explaining to me how to make a deal with North Korea. I get a big kick out of that. But we are doing very well. I think that something very dramatic could happen.
Terry Moran joined us now from South Korea. He's just south of the DMZ tonight. And Terry, the president now says that they've actually narrowed down the possible locations for his summit with Kim Jong-un.
That's right, David. They've got 2 or 3 possible locations, but it's been tough. First, both sides want it on neutral ground. It needs to be close because Kim Jong-un's airplane is so old it's only got a range of a couple thousand miles. So Singapore has risen to the top of the list, but Mongolia is making a bid too, so we'll have to see. David?
We are one nation. Sign a peace treaty before the end of 2018. And Donald Trump's comment is telling. I will be watching how people who have failed for the past 25 years, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, who did I leave out? How you guys have failed over the last 25 years to do anything of substance in North Korea. And now I come in 1 year by knowing exactly what to say and to whom to say it, to get this artificial barrier that the West pretty much concocted and nurtured and move it out of the way. They're vowing to denuclearize the peninsula, take nuclear weapons off the peninsula. Now, of course, whether or not all this happens, that's another thing entirely. But the reason it might happen is the reason the North Koreans gave back in January. These are our brethren. Some people understand the importance of family. Others, like many in this country, do not. I'm honestly surprised, but I'm of the opinion as time goes by that this president, to my shock and amazement, is really a human nature genius. He really does know how to communicate with people in ways that get them to respond. For me, his one failure is Syria. I do not understand what's going on in Syria, and I'm lost on that. But Trump has achieved a result using unconventional methods that more conventional methods could not get. And he has turned loose the natural desire for unification, which is the only thing that ever mattered. We may see a Korea without a prefix of South or North in the very near future. I think that would be great. I don't know when it's going to occur, but old Asian proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Nobel Committee, are you watching? If the Koreans sign a peace treaty ending finally the Korean War, is there anyone else you can give the award to? Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, Finland and Bernie Sanders now differ over the guaranteed income thing, or what is called universal basic income. If you're not aware of this, you need to be, because it is actually going into effect in places like Stockton, California, where the idiot 27-year-old mayor, who happens to be black, is going to give everybody who is low income, think about that for a minute, $500 a month, no questions asked. When I say think about that, who defines who's low income? Where's the line drawn? How much fudging do you need to do to make everybody really? We'll get into the other things later. You already have, I think his name is Andrew Yang, a declared candidate for president, I believe, in the Democrat Party. He may not be in any party, but I believe he's associated with the Democrat Party, who's in support of this notion. And you will hear people say some other crazy things. For example, Mark Zuckerberg last year at his commencement speech at Harvard had this to say.
Now, today, we have a level of wealth inequality that hurts everyone. When you don't have the freedom to take your idea and turn it into a historic enterprise, we all lose. And right now, today, our society is way over-indexed on rewarding people when they're successful, and we don't do nearly enough to make sure that everyone can take lots of different shots. Now, let's face it. There is something wrong with our system when I can leave here and make billions of dollars in 10 years, while millions of students can't even afford to pay off their loans, let alone start a business. Look, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I don't know a single person who gave up on starting a business because they were worried they might not make enough money. But I know too many people who haven't had the chance to pursue their dreams because they didn't have a cushion to fall back on if they failed. We all know you don't get successful just by having a good idea or working hard. You get successful by being lucky, too. If I had to support my family growing up instead of having the time to learn how to code, if I didn't know that I was going to be fine if Facebook didn't work out, then I wouldn't be standing up here today. And if we're honest, we all know how much luck we've had to get to this point in our lives. Every generation expands its definition of equality. Previous generations fought for the vote and civil rights. They had the New Deal and Great Society. And now it's time for our generation to define a new social contract. We should have a society that measures progress not just by economic metrics like GDP, but by how many of us have a role we find meaningful. We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas. We're all going to change jobs and roles many times, so we need affordable child care to get to work and health care that's not tied to just one employer. And we're all going to make mistakes, so we need a society that's less focused on locking us up and stigmatizing us when we do. And as our technology keeps on evolving, we need a society that is more focused on providing continuous education through our lives.
The man hit every conceivable income, social democrat, whatever thing you wanted to touch there. But what he demonstrated with that speech is a full misunderstanding of human nature. If you give human beings all this stuff, they will do nothing. We already know that. Anyone who knows human nature knows that if you do not make striving worthwhile with its risks, then you'll never get anybody's best effort. That's all there is to it. Now, at the World Government Summit in Dubai last year, Elon Musk, who seems to have some type of a shooting war going on, war of words, with Mr. Zuckerberg, he kind of touched on part of the problem with doing all this stuff with people, but here were his comments at the World Government Summit.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better. Okay. What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job. Machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. And if my assessment is correct and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. Now, the output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.
There it was, meaning. Work gives people meaning. Striving gives people meaning. Comfort never does anything but take away from human drive. No biggie. It's just the truth. So those were two large titans of industry, as you might say, going forward with their ideas. What we need to do, always be cautious when you hear smart, rich people try to tell others how society needs to be. Always be wary of that. Now, Bernie Sanders was speaking of this himself during the campaign of 2016. That, of course, went nowhere. But in May of 2017, he was in Berlin, and he had these comments.
First question is, you support minimum wage for all Americans. You support minimum wage for all Americans. Do you also support a UBI, the Universal Basic Income?
I do, but that is not where we are. I think that is a very correct idea. In other words, what that essentially says is that no family, I think it's Finland that's beginning to move in that direction. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's Finland.
And I absolutely support it. But right now, where we are, I mean, that's kind of a step too far right now for the United States. So what we are doing, and I'm proud I authored the legislation to raise the minimum wage right now in the United States. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which is very, very low. We have offered legislation which now has 30 co-sponsors to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we are also addressing a very important issue in terms of wages in America, and I don't know what it is here. I'd be interested in learning. In America, women in general make about 79 cents on the dollar compared to men doing the same work. And we are trying to push forward legislation that says the very radical idea, equal pay for equal work.
So Bernie Sanders goes to a social democrat country and talks about how social democracy needs to be implemented in the United States. Let's remember he got his butt cheated and kicked in the 2016 election. Nevertheless, he persists. Now you notice he mentioned Finland and said Finland is moving in that direction. Really? Well, Newsy published a report on the 25th of April that spoke directly to what direction Finland was going on universal basic income.
Finland is winding down its experiment with universal basic income. In case you're not familiar, universal basic income is a government program that gives citizens a set amount of money each month. no strings attached. Finland currently provides around $685 a month to about 2,000 randomly chosen unemployed Finnish people. Although Finland has a pretty large safety net for out-of-work people, even getting a part-time job could cost someone their benefits under the current system. The idea is that universal basic income would make up for some of those lost benefits and allow people to keep working. The Finnish Social Security Office was hoping to expand the program this year, but the government instead decided to end it in January of 2019. A new welfare strategy in the country is partially to blame for the program being discontinued, but a recent think tank study also found the country's income tax would have to increase by almost 30% to fund basic income in Finland.
Here's what gets lost in all of this discussion about universal basic income. Where's the money going to come from? You can't just print it without producing something for it, because then the money is worthless. You want an example about that? Go look at interwar Germany and see what happens when people have inflation so high, because nobody's really producing anything. They really couldn't, that it took a wheelbarrow worth of paper money to buy a loaf of bread. Guys, understand this very clearly. This is a bad idea whose time has never come. Finland tried it and they said this isn't going to work. There is no formulation of universal basic income that's going to work with human beings. That's all there is to it. I know the progressives and the social democrats and the socialists and everybody else who's left of center keeps believing that no matter how many times their ideas fail, if we just try it with the right people, as though there are new people in the world, then this will somehow work for us. It's not true. But as I said, it's going on in Stockton now. There are people like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. There's a guy running for president who's declared for president, who's putting that out there as part of his platform. All this is moving in your direction, and it's going to take standing up and telling them no at the ballot box to stop it. I don't think America has a problem doing that. They just did it in 2016. I don't think they'll have a problem doing it in 2018. We'll see. But you need to recognize this is not new, but it's never going to work. And if you allow them to try it, you're only going to suffer. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Over in California, a breakup is almost inevitable. I'm not saying it is imminent or it is very close at hand, but California is edging closer to some type of breakup. Back on the 12th of April, Fox News Insider ran a story and had an interview with a city council member from Newport Beach.
Newport Beach City Councilman Scott Piotr. He voted in support of this move, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Councilman. Thanks for being with us.
Morning, Ainsley.
Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you. So your council voted 7-0. Everyone's in favor of opting out and not complying with SB 54. Why is that?
Well, we felt that it's a tool in the toolbox for our police to help keep criminals off the street, and it has nothing to do with immigration, as a lot of our opponents are trying to say. Instead, we're trying to deal with illegal alien criminals, and so we joined the growing list of cities trying to tell Sacramento that we are not very happy about the law.
When Jerry Brown said he supports this law, when a lot of Californians went to the polls and they voted for this law, what were your thoughts? Were you going to be vocal, or did you decide and your council decide to be vocal once other cities started doing this?
No, actually, we started to attack this last year when it was in the legislature before it became law. We actually sent a letter to the legislature encouraging them not to pass it, or to at least incorporate changes that wouldn't handcuff our police forces to be able to work with ICE to apprehend illegal alien criminals.
Do you think the governor is starting to listen to you guys and listen to, I know the southern part of the state is a little bit more conservative, or a lot more conservative. Is he starting to hear what your opinions are?
Sacramento is controlled by 2/3 Democrats, so they really don't have to listen to us, and that's been their history. I hope that they'd listen, but obviously they didn't last year, and that's why we decided to join the lawsuit against the state by Jeff Sessions.
Then why do you think he's sending those 400 National Guard troops down to the border? He's responding to the president.
Well, you listen to Jerry Brown, and he's sending them there for other reasons, not for immigration purposes. In either event, that the troops end up being at the border, so it's a matter of whose spin do you want to listen to.
And what's your message to the folks in the northern part of your state that are complying with SB 54?
Well, we want to be a law and order city. We want to be a law and order state. And we want to comply both with federal law and state law. And they put us into a situation that we have to choose. We don't like it.
Thank you so much, Councilman, for being with us. Great to see you.
Thanks,
Have a great weekend.
Regarding the sanctuary city or sanctuary state law in California, we are now up to, with Newport Beach, as you just heard that city council member speak, we're up to 13 different cities, all of them in Southern California at this point, that are opposing the law to the point of joining the federal lawsuit that is going against the state. Those cities would be Barstow, which if you're trying to get from Los Angeles to Nevada, Las Vegas in particular, you know all about that place. So Barstow, Hesperia, Los Alamitos, Westminster, Fountain Valley, Huntington Beach, Aliso Viejo, Escondido, San Juan Capistrano, Mission Viejo, Orange, Yorba Linda, and of course the aforementioned Newport Beach. These cities are saying no. They have a problem with this, and because they're in California, and because political correctness is a big deal in that state, I know, I live there, here, you can't come out and say things except in a certain way. You'll notice he didn't say it was about keeping American citizens first. He said it was about law enforcement. It's about keeping communities safe from criminality. I get that. And the last part of it is where you go. We want to be a law and order city and a law and order state. We want to comply with federal law and state law. They put us into a situation where we have to choose, and we don't like it. Very politically savvy response. Now, there is a California county that has gone as far as to say they're going to publish the release times of inmates and illegal immigrants. So they're basically thumbing their nose. Say, well, you say we're just going to publish those release times. If ICE chooses to read it and respond, that's their business. There's another story also on Fox News Insider saying it's unconstitutional. So there are more cities looking to opt out. California has a problem with this sanctuary city thing, and it's not as much with the federal government, though there is that problem. They have an internal problem, which means the progressives in Sacramento are fighting a political war on two fronts. And for anyone who has any military background or any knowledge of military strategy, that's not where you want to be. If everybody we're fighting is on one side, that's great. But now if they're coming at me from two sides, I have a problem. They're coming at you from within the state and from without the state. And that's going to be a problem for the progressives. Is it something they can overcome? If that were the only thing that were going on in California, then to be honest with you, I don't even know that this would really be a problem. But there is another problem going on in California. And that is the continuing nagging effort to break the state up. Here's the most interesting thing that has happened to date. This is from CBS 2 News. This was another report on the 12th of April.
A proposal to split California into 3 states could make the November ballot. Venture capitalist Tim Draper spearheading the initiative called Cal3. It has more than 600,000 signatures and will be submitted to election officials next week. Cal3 needed signatures from more than 365,000 registered voters, 5% of the total votes cast for governor in the 2014 election, to qualify for the ballot. Ultimately, splitting California into 3 states would require congressional approval. Matt Yuris for CBS 2 News.
They needed 350,000 signatures to get that on the ballot. They got more than 600,000. I am not one who is trying to say I'm going to predict right now that the people of California are going to vote to break the state up into 3 different states. I know what I'm going to do if that thing makes the ballot. I know I'm going to vote to break the state up. Do I think it will prevail? Maybe not this time. I would almost go so far as to say likely not this time. But there's already a move afoot to demonstrate to the powers that be in Sacramento that a 3-state solution, that's what I'm going to start calling it, the California 3-state solution. They want to talk about the 2-state solution in Israel. Let's talk about the 3-state solution in California, because that's where we're headed. And I don't think it's bad at all. What it would be is a fiasco and a debacle for progressives in the state. The 50-plus electoral votes in California would no longer be guaranteed to the Democrat Party. The 50-plus congressional seats would probably have more. It's probably going to be the same number of seats, but coming from 2 additional states, and they would not be as heavily Democrat. Just wouldn't. But the Electoral College is the big deal. Because right now, most states, including California, are a winner-take-all in the popular vote within the state. So all 50-plus electoral votes go to the winner of the popular vote. That's not the case if you have 3 states occupying what's currently California. There would be some GOP, and that would be a problem. There are already Republican congressmen, so that's not that big a deal. But the biggest thing would be breaking up the state to the point where now you have to deal with the resources. And one of those real resources is water. Because water prices are rising in California because of the poor water management. Now, you got to remember there are certain things that are just indigenous to California. Much of the state is a desert or resembles an arid Mediterranean area, so there's not a lot of water to begin with. Now, the other thing is water often has to come from distant sources, so you have large infrastructure projects. That's a problem because the way the state spends money, infrastructure is not what they maintain best. They spend money on giving people money they didn't earn. They support, quote unquote, the poor and the immigrants and the everything else and the homeless, and they're manufacturing these people by the hundreds and thousands. You got to remember, California has the biggest wealth inequality gap of any state in the union, which is amazing since that is one of their big selling points. We don't want to be that group, but they are. Because of all these factors, California is going to get broken up eventually. And it may not be by an earthquake on one of the major faults within the state. This could very well be a political breakup. I personally would welcome it. There are some other people who would as well. But that is not going to be easy or pretty. But I like it. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. The American press is still trying to conjure a blue wave, a Democrat surge of voter enthusiasm that is supposed to overtake the majorities in the House and Senate, and also, of course, lead to the removal of President Trump because he is so very unpopular. That has to be documented. Here is something that we got from the Wall Street Journal, which I would have liked to have thought was a little bit more objective, back on the 6th of March.
Wave elections against the White House. You want to see a wave?
This is what a wave feels like.
It could be a blue wave year.
This year's midterm elections are all about the wave. Democrats are certainly expected to pick up some seats in 2018. The sitting president's party has gained seats in both houses in just 2 midterms in the last 150 years. Does that mean the Dems will definitely take the House or the Senate? Not exactly. The Democrats may have the wave, but the Republicans have the wall, a substantial majority in the House and a strong economy. So which one will prevail? Consider 3 recent midterm waves. In 1994, when Republicans gained 54 House seats. In 2006, when Democrats won 31. And in 2010, when Republicans picked up 63. They tended to share 5 common themes: a low presidential approval rating, intensity in the opposition party, success in special elections, a lot of retirements in the majority party, and a weak economy. So let's look at 2018. President Trump has the lowest approval rating of any modern president at the end of their first year. So check. Intensity in the opposition party? Check. Big check. Special election success?
But we have shown the country the way that we can be unified.
Check. A lot of retirements? Check. 35 so far. But what about a weak economy? Well, no. Not only is the economy doing well despite the recent market turmoil, perhaps even more importantly, people believe the economy is doing well. And that doesn't help the Democratic wave. Even so, by most measures, it looks like Democrats will ride the wave to win back seats in Congress. But will they pick up enough to clear the Republican wall? To take back the House, Democrats need to pick up 24 new seats, in addition to holding on to the ones they already have. They could succeed. At least 6 GOP-held seats are expected to turn over. 18 are considered a toss-up, and 21 are considered competitive. The GOP wall may be stronger in the Senate. Democrats need to pick up at least 2 seats while defending 26, while Republicans only need to defend 8. The GOP has another thing to strengthen that wall: gerrymandering. Congressional redistricting in many key places favors Republican incumbents. Will that be enough to hold back the wave? Even if the Democrats fail to take back the House or Senate, a wave of victories is likely to wash out some of the Republican power in Washington.
I'm not even sure where to begin with that. Let's talk about some of the factors that this report indicated boded well, or do bode well for the Democrats. Low approval rating. Donald Trump's approval rating is higher than that of Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama got killed in his first midterm, but that was because of Obamacare. Let's talk about, they mentioned the low economy, but he also talked about voter enthusiasm and saying that the Democrats have high voter enthusiasm. I dare say it's not higher than GOP voter enthusiasm at this point. They talked about special election success. There have been 9 special elections since Donald Trump was inaugurated. The Republicans have won 6 of them. I'm not exactly how losing 2 out of every 3 special elections indicates that you're being successful. And of course the economy is doing very well. But still they want to push this idea of a blue wave. I think it's just laughable. But when you have no policies and your candidates do not resonate, that's kind of what you're left with. There was a special election recently, I think it was the 24th, in Arizona, Congressional District 8. CNN went there and they tried to push the blue wave as that election was approaching.
Trump country in Arizona. Voters, some with walkers, clutching brochures, filling the room for Democrat Hero Tiperneni, running in Arizona Congressional District 8 special election.
Very few of the voters here actually look like you.
Yes, it's true, but they think like me. You know, they are talking about the same issue.
Like healthcare and Social Security. Dr. Tiperneni, a former emergency room doctor, the first Democrat to run here in 2 congressional cycles, propelled by Democratic upsets in Alabama and Pennsylvania.
After what we learned in Pennsylvania, every vote counts.
We like her a lot, too. Democrats forging into a district Trump won by 21 percentage points. National Republicans spending money to blunt this Democratic challenger.
Republicans have put in an estimated million plus into this race. When you look at that figure, what do you think?
I think they're scared. Why else are they investing in a race that they haven't invested in years?
But Arizona 8 is not Pennsylvania.
You may notice a little something as you take a look at this crowd. It's older, predominantly white. That's because that's what the voters of this congressional district look like.
Most importantly, registered Republicans outnumbered Democrats by more than 70,000 voters.
Yay! We're having fun!
Why Republican Debbie Lesko is all smiles. The longtime state lawmaker known here for pushing a law allowing more street access for golf carts in this district packed with retirement communities.
They had a parade for you after that law passed.
It was awesome.
What percentage do you have to win by that you'll look at it as a comfortable win?
Well, I want to win by double digits.
10%?
But, you know, 10% would be good. Higher would be better. But, you know, a win is a win.
Do you feel that Democratic energy from where you sit?
Yeah, more so than in the last 9 years that I was in the state legislature. It's a different feeling this year. They're energized. We need to make sure that our base on the Republican side is just as energized. 1, 2, 3, win! Woo!
Democrats say this race is an uphill climb. For the party, it's not just about winning here, but momentum for the fall midterms.
Regardless of what happens on the 24th, do you send a message?
We absolutely send a message because they have never seen this in CD8 before. It's just going to grow.
They lost Arizona 8, the Democrats did. And what the winner, Ms. Lesko, said is true. A win is a win. In politics, one vote's as good as 100,000, as good as 1,000,000. Because at the end of the day, you take office. And incumbents win more than 9 out of 10 times in D.C. She will now be the incumbent. So some of this stuff really doesn't matter. What they're trying to do is push Pyrrhic victories. There was also back in March a discussion about a blue wave that was going to take over in Texas, and the Democrats were going to show the Republicans finally how much strength they have in that state. Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire reported on that after the GOP primary, or the primary in that state back on the 7th, and the blue wave didn't quite get as far in as folks would have imagined.
The Texas primaries were today. I couldn't sign off without talking about this. This was too delicious. This was too... So good. Democrats told us yesterday, for the past few weeks, there was going to be an overwhelming Democrat turnout. You're going to see more Democrats turn out than Republicans. We've got the blue wave coming. You're going to be like Morgan Freeman in that movie. No. They said that early voting, voter registrations, had Democrat numbers up over 100% and Republicans just 10%. Oh, no, I'm Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact. No. President Trump, your reaction. Very well put, President Trump. They have been telling us about the big blue wave in Texas for years. Abortion Barbie promised that she was going to turn Texas blue. They're trying to give amnesty to 3.6 million likely Democrat voters to turn Texas blue. That's right. GOP turnout was over 50% higher than Democrat turnout. Sad. Over 50% higher. In the gubernatorial primary, Republicans broke their own record for the highest turnout in history. Republicans cast just about 1.5 million votes yesterday. Democrats just a little over 1 million. Sad. Absolutely dreadful turnout for Democrats. In 2002, Democrats had a great year. They cast more ballots in those races than Republicans. This year, 50% down. Sad.
For the Senate race, Ted Cruz's Senate seat, Cruz picked up 85% of the GOP vote. His next closest competitor was Mary Miller, who picked up 6%. Looking pretty good for Ted Cruz. On the Democrat side, the leading contender, the person who was going to trounce Ted Cruz, the appropriately named Beto O'Rourke, grabbed just 62% of the Democrat primary vote, nowhere near what Democrats were hoping. Maybe it's Beta O'Rourke. Who knows? I don't know. That's very mean. Democrats wanted to smack down George P. Bush, land commissioner in Texas. Just didn't happen. Politico dejectedly reports that Bush cruised to victory. By the way, despite his last name, George P. Bush embraced President Covfefe because despite the constant negative press, Donald Trump remains popular. And it worked. It helped him. Another takeaway from this, great news. I guess it doesn't really matter because we're out fundraising Democrats too, but the money didn't really matter that much. 3 Democrats who led the way in fundraising throughout 2017, they didn't even reach the runoffs in top-tier congressional races. Ed Meyer, a former Obama State Department official, he led all of his opponents in fundraising. He ended up in 4th place. Womp womp.
So Texas was a disaster for the Democrats. Now, on the good side, they had 87% increase from 2014. But they still only cast 2/3 the votes of Republicans. Republicans put in 50% more votes than Democrats. The blue wave was swallowed up by a red tide. Understand this about the Democrats. They have no platform. They have no message. They don't really have any candidates. What they have is a media that is going to campaign for them in ways that they cannot campaign for themselves. Again, you have heard all about special election victories on behalf of the Democrats. They've lost 6 of 9 races. 6 of 9. Think about that. Nevertheless, we're still talking about a potential blue wave. It's propaganda, folks. This is straight out of the President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, Joseph Goebbels' playbook of propaganda. They know they're lying, but if they tell the lie enough, then they're going to find some low information voter who will believe it. And with that, I'll turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and then we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
It seems that the deep state is more entrenched than anyone ever imagined. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards on today's page from the Edwards Notebook. You can call former President Barack Hussein Obama many things, but a simple puppet being controlled by others, he's not one of them. Since long before he was elected, with a little help from his Democrat cheaters are us friends, he meticulously studied ways to undermine our beloved republic. When he became president, one key avenue to that end was the hiring of 7,000 to 8,000 senior services executive members who were employed to destroy any efforts to strengthen, prosper, enable America to reach her potential as that shining city on a hill nation that is the premier example of liberty, freedom, domestic tranquility, equal opportunity, and true justice for all. Before Obama's presidency, there were only 1,000 senior executive services members, and that evil cartel was probably started under Jimmy Carter. They answer to no one and are set to render the Trump administration null and void if they can. Their names are secret, as are their salaries, and they are running all government agencies in secret. That is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people. With God's help and grace, it shall be again. I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. I'm just going to say this clearly. Blacks in America are in denial regarding their political impotence, and that's what they are. They are politically impotent. They were not always that way. As a matter of fact, you can go back after the end of the Civil War and look through Reconstruction, the early part of Reconstruction, and find that they had great political influence. The problem was it was not real. It was imposed. It was fake. And once the artificial support for that power was removed, blacks ended up in a worse political position in the Old South than they had even when they were almost as bad as when they were in chains. Still, they rose to a political height of power in the late 1950s, mid to late 1950s, and that actually lasted a little bit longer than a decade, maybe a dozen years, until legislation was passed that they thought favored them. But when blacks were at the height of their political power post-Reconstruction, they really didn't have the vote in many old Confederate states. Yet they had the political power to move the federal government. Because they had the power, the moral prerogative that actually moved the nation. They actually had moral authority. But then they cast their lot with progressives who considered them uppity. That is what LBJ said about black people. They're uppity. We need to give them something enough to keep them quiet, not enough to make a difference. That's exactly what they gave you with the Voting Rights Act, with the Civil Rights Acts. They gave you things that made you quiet and did not make a difference. If they did make a difference, you wouldn't be where you are today. You accepted a false preference in affirmative action masquerading as equality, as though equality was actually supposed to be the goal. Citizenship was the goal. But you accepted legislation instead of citizenship. Well, they gave us the right to vote. If you're an American citizen, it comes with the right to vote. If you're asking for someone to pass legislation so that you can vote, you are acknowledging, both of you are acknowledging, those who accept the legislation and those who enact the legislation, that you're really not citizens. You abandoned the moral high ground for the muck and mire of politics. And a politics that did not favor you. You turned your back on God, who sustained you through slavery, allowed you to endure Jim Crow, and brought you to the great victories of the Civil Rights Movement And once you got there or arrived at a place you thought you had arrived, you turned your back on God in favor of government. You turned your back on family in favor of identity politics. What do I mean? You actually allowed a white government to pay black women to keep black men away from black children. They told you that it was going to devastate you within a year and a half of when they put those policies in place. They put it on paper what it was going to do to you. It was already doing that to you. And despite that, because you got a check, you continued to vote for them, and you are still voting for them. And your family's in tatters. And in the process of becoming people who believed in government more than they believe in God, you made yourself less American in the process. You became hypercritical of America and the country's real values. At the same time, you're demanding benefits from the government. Demanding them. Well, now we're faced with some political realities. There's only one way to put this. You don't matter anymore in national politics. Let's take a look at some numbers here. Blacks are 12.6% of registered voters. Not that far off from what they represent as part of the population. Latinos are only 9.7% of registered voters, but they have surpassed blacks with regard to population. Asians are still less than 4%. Whites, 73%. 73%. Actually, it's a little bit higher than that. You're outnumbered 6-1 by whites. And you honestly think that decrying them and calling them names, unfair names, and in many cases untrue, is the way for you to flex your political muscle? You don't have any. And not only do you not have the numbers to begin with, minorities turnout in voting has declined. It declined in 2016. And the interesting thing is, you're making the point, well, if we turn out, we're going to vote. If whites turn out, that's all that matters. And they turned out for Trump. And the country, despite your whining black left, the country is doing better now under Trump than it ever did under Barack Obama. And you are getting a benefit from the country doing better. And instead of acknowledging that, taking that and running with it and building up the things that have been broken down for more than 5 decades of progressivism, you're still whining about stuff that really... Let me make this more clear to you. Whites cast more than 73% of votes in America in recent elections. 73%. Blacks, less than 12%. You're being outvoted 6-1 by white people. And there's nothing you can do about that unless you're going to basically put every white person, every registered voting white person on house arrest on election day. You're not going to get there. Further, where blacks rule, blacks aren't doing that well. Atlanta, which is held up as a great example of black progress and black advancement, crime is significant there. Blight is significant there. And Atlanta is the international HIV capital for black people. Period. Talk about Detroit. Detroit had been the wealthiest per capita city in all of North America. And then blacks took over. And for 4 decades ran it steadily into the ground until it became the largest municipal bankruptcy in history. There's crime there. They couldn't even deliver water there. And you had municipal failure, not just financial. Baltimore, Crime, again. That's a consistent thing wherever blacks live as in significant numbers. Crime is there. White people aren't the ones committing this crime. Homicide is off the chart in Baltimore, a black city. Heroin. Baltimore is the heroin capital of the United States. 1 in every 10 residents, not 1 in every 10 adults, 1 in every 10 residents of Baltimore is using heroin. And that doesn't even match up with all the other unresolved problems wherever blacks live as a plurality or a majority. Again, crime. Then there's illegitimacy and abortion and drugs and sexually transmitted diseases and a weak family structure and government dependency. None of this is good. As a result, blacks have been surpassed by Latinos in numbers, and they've been reduced to political beggars. How come Trump doesn't have any blacks in his case? He didn't need any blacks. You weren't with him, but you want him to be for you? What kind of silliness is that? The fact is, no one needs blacks. The Democrats lost with them, and the GOP won without them. Black Lives Matter has been exposed for several years now as a fraudulent movement that some blacks cling to, and the rest of the country looks at you like, are you guys serious? Whites have finally remembered who they are, and they're less apologetic about racism that's not real. They're not about to apologize for what they don't think, and they're less likely to accept the judgment of black people about their actions or history. So, black folks, you need to get it together. You're not needed. And the way you conduct yourselves, you're not even wanted nationally. Nobody cares about you. And the primary reason is because we don't care about ourselves as black people. We know what the problems are, and we talk about everything other than our problems when we're talking about a black agenda. We need to deal with systemic racism. No, you need to deal with the reason you have burglar bars up in your communities when nobody's there in your communities but more of us. Because until you fix those things, which are indicative of what your real problem is, you have no hope at political relevance in this country. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let me continue on with the theme of black political impotence by highlighting something that just happened last week.
Comedian Bill Cosby was convicted on Thursday on all 3 counts of drugging and molesting a one-time friend in 2004. This is a significant victory for the prosecution and one of the first celebrity sexual assault trials of the Me Too era. 80-year-old Cosby is best known as the lovable father from the 1980s TV hit The Cosby Show. He faces up to 10 years in prison for each of the 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault of Andrea Constand. Constand is one of 50 women who have accused Cosby of sexual assault. All of the other allegations are believed to be too old to be prosecuted.
I cannot imagine that any other community other than blacks would allow someone as iconic as Bill Cosby, as being a member of their community, to be so terribly treated by the justice system. Let me make sure you understand. There was more uproar among blacks about Stephon Clark, who got shot in Sacramento, who had more court cases than he had adult years, than there was about Bill Cosby being railroaded. And Bill Cosby was railroaded. This was not a first trial, it was a mistrial. And let's not overlook the fact that the judge, who had good reason to recuse himself when asked by the defense to get rid of the very credible appearance of bias, he allowed 5 additional people to testify whose cases could not be tried and therefore should have been admissible. For some reason, he allowed them to be admitted. For some reason. Could have been because of his bias. Let's not forget that the person who accused him said that, well, you know, after that occurred, I never talked to Bill Cosby again. Really? Got phone records that say there were 72 calls between the two of them after the incident, and 53 of them were initiated by her. There's evidence that she showed up with her parents at one of his comedy shows in the same year that she claimed she was sexually assaulted, and brought him a sweater as a gift. She couldn't remember what month this occurred in. But there's no reasonable doubt. See, this is the thing. There should not have been a mistrial in the first case. There should have been an acquittal. But we live in the Me Too era, and there are no black people. The black race pimps don't defend people who don't ride with them. And Bill Cosby did not ride with them. Bill Cosby is an accomplished man, not dependent upon the black victim mentality. I'm just going to go through some of Bill Cosby's television shows, just a few of them. 1965, he was the first black man to star in a dramatic series. That series was called I Spy, ran for 3 years, and Bill Cosby won 3 Emmys. Every year that show was on, he got an Emmy. The Bill Cosby Show in 1969 through 71, The Electric Company from 1971 to 1973, The New Bill Cosby Show 72 and 73, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, including The Brown Hornet, ran from 1972 through 1985. Cos was another series that he had for 1 year, 1976. The Cosby Show, which everybody remembers him as Dr. Cliff Huxtable, ran from 84 to 92. Different World was a spinoff that ran from 87 to 93. The Cosby Mysteries he had from 1994 to 95. There was another Cosby Show from 1996 through 2000 that moved from NBC over to CBS. Little Bill was a children's show he did from 1999 through 2004. Fatherhood ran from 2004 through 2005. And he had a web series dealing with children called OBKB that ran from 2009 to 2012. That's not an exhaustive list of his television shows. That does not include what he has done in movies. It doesn't include any of his comedy albums or any of his other comedy routines. It doesn't include any of that. That man is an entertainment icon. Where were black people standing up just to make sure he got a fair shake? Because they would have done that. They came out of the woodwork to defend Michael Brown. They came out of the woodwork to defend Philando Castile. They came out of the woodwork to defend all these black nobodies, relatively speaking, no accomplishments, nothing, and they didn't show up to push on behalf of Bill Cosby when the evidence against him from a criminal standpoint was tissue paper thin. Where were you? That's the question you got to ask. And why weren't you there? Now that one I can answer. In 2004, after his failed attempt to take over NBC, which kind of put everybody on notice, not only is this guy powerful, influential, and he doesn't necessarily think the way we do, he actually wants to have real power. He wants to own NBC. Well, 11 years after that, he crystallized all the opposition against him in 2004 with what has become known as the pound cake speech.
In the old days, you couldn't hook his school because behind every drawn shade was an eye. And before your mother got off the bus into the house, she knew exactly where you had gone, who had gone into the house. Parents don't know that today. I'm talking about these people who cry when their son is standing there in an orange suit. Where were you when he was 2? Where were you when he was 12? Where were you when he was 18? And how come you don't know he had a pistol? These are not political criminals. These are people going around stealing Coca-Cola. People getting shot in the back of the head over a piece of pound cake. And then we all run out and we're outraged. Oh, the cops shouldn't have shot him. What the hell was he doing with the pound cake in his hand? Brown versus the Board of Education is no longer the white person's problem. We've got to take the neighborhood back. We've got to go in there. It's right around the corner. It's standing on the corner. It can't speak English. It doesn't want to speak English. I can't even talk the way these people talk. Why you ain't where you is and go where? I don't know who these people are. And I blamed the kid until I heard the mother talk. And then I heard the father talk. This is all in the house. Everybody knows it's important to speak English, except these knuckleheads. You can't land a plane with why you ain't where. You can't be a doctor with that kind of crap coming out of your mouth. Why can't you hit the streets? Why can't you clean it out yourself? It's our time now, ladies and gentlemen. It is our time. And I have good news for you. It's not about money. It's about you doing something that ordinarily we do. Get in somebody else's business. It's time for you to not accept this language that these people are speaking, which will take them nowhere. What the hell good is Brown versus the Board of Education if nobody wants it? I mean, this is the future, and all of these people who've lined up and done whatever, they've got to be wondering, what the hell happened? Brown versus the Board of Education. These people who marched and were hit in the face with rocks and punched in the face to get an education. And we got these knuckleheads walking around, don't want to learn English. When you go to the church, look at the stained glass things of Jesus. Look at them. Is Jesus smiling? Not in one picture. So tell your friends, let's try to do something. Let's try and make Jesus smile. Let's start parenting. Thank you. Thank you.
That speech made everything crystal clear to progressives in America. Whites could no longer abide his appeal and his abilities and his desire for real power. He was someone who could get into the entertainment realm, into the executive areas of entertainment, and upset their apple cart because his message was not black victimization and black victimhood. Liberal blacks couldn't abide his exposing their failed victim ideology. He was basically saying it. This isn't anybody else's fault but yours, black people. You are the ones who are giving birth to and raising these idiots, and then when their idiocy gets them in trouble, you want to blame somebody else. He didn't go along with that program. And I have learned throughout my adult life, whenever there is a black man moving up, there is always a woman available to bring him down. I saw it first in 1990. I'm not saying it didn't happen before then, but I saw it first in 1990 when they dug up Anita Hill to go after Clarence Thomas. I saw it played out again on a large scale with Herman Cain when he ran for president. Herman Cain had his own problems, but they just conjured up some women and went about it that way. They even do this to white people. Somebody might remember Gary Hart, who was running for the Democrat nomination. I can't remember what year that was. And then someone found Donna Rice and a picture of him sitting on a boat with her in his lap, and the next thing he was gone. This is what folks do with men who are ambitious. And guess what? They tried to do it to King. They should have been able to do it with King. King was a serial adulterer. But everybody wants to overlook that. And I would dare say Martin Luther King may have slept with more women than Cosby drugged. But he's a progressive darling in death. Wasn't necessarily one in life, but he's definitely one in death. And then there's still the matter of Bill Clinton, who raped more women than Bill Cosby ever drugged. He raped more women by accident than Bill Cosby drugged on purpose. But no one stands up for Bill Cosby. Why? 2 reasons. One, he doesn't fit your mold. And the blacks who actually want his legacy to be remembered and honored because it is significant, it is an American force, you guys just don't have any political power. You're sold to the race pimps, and they're sold to the white progressives, and none of them like Bill Cosby. So now you have an 80-year-old man with a conviction, as though that's going to amount to all it does is work to tear down his legacy, and an impotent people allowed white progressives to do this to a black man. I'm done with you guys. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, which way, Kanye? Now, this gentleman has found a way back into the news, and he has done that by expressing some level of support for Donald Trump. There's a story in USA Today that came out on the 28th of April. Kanye West defends Trump tweets in new song and says Late Mom Surgeon will be his album cover. That's well, okay. Kanye West is at it again. That's about the size of it. Hours after releasing a new song, the rapper dropped another track titled Ye versus the People, or Ye versus, I don't know how you deal with this, where he defends his controversial support of Donald Trump. Why is that controversial? Oh, that's right, he's black. And he's in entertainment. And just like Cosby couldn't be black in entertainment and not toe the progressive line, well, Kanye can't do that. I guess a line from his, well, actually, I think this was one of his tweets. Make America Great Again had a negative reception. I took it, wore it, rocked it, gave it a new direction. He continued saying, that's the problem with this expletive nation. All blacks got to be Democrats. Man, we ain't made it off the plantation. This is from the song Ye versus the People that he did with T.I., a former drug dealer. Forget who you choose as your political party, T.I. reports. You're representing dudes who seem crude and cold-hearted. Now, that track debuted on a Los Angeles radio station. Lift Yourself, or Life Yourself, and Ye versus the People are West's first new songs since 2016. And he's also teasing about an upcoming album. He also tweeted a photo Saturday of the plastic surgeon, Jan Adams, who performed surgery on his mother the day before she died. So some of this stuff just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm not Kanye West. In the tweet, the rapper says the photo will be his new album cover. I want to forgive and stop hating, he wrote. So Kanye West, yeah, he's at it again. He's all over the place. But he did the unthinkable in the minds of black leftists, and that is he actually had something positive to say about Donald Trump. There's an alderman whose last name is Ramirez Rosa, who just went off about this, and I believe this is TMZ that caught this and recorded it. I'll just let you listen.
People are very disappointed. I mean, I think the general consensus is that Kanye is canceled. And I think that for a very long time, Chicagoans have felt like Kanye was that family member that, you know, you felt the need to defend, even though you felt like sometimes they were in the wrong. But no Chicagoan is defending Kanye right now. What he has done is reprehensible. It is wrong for him to support a president that has done so much to hurt black and brown youth, to hurt working people in the city of Chicago and across the United States. What I would ask Kanye to do is to meet with people on the ground in the city of Chicago that are organizing every single day to take on the racism, to take on the anti-worker, to take on the anti-immigrant policies that are coming out of Donald Trump's White House. We have seen Donald Trump and his policies cause so much pain to Chicago's families, and I would ask Kanye to meet with those individuals that have been directly impacted by the policies coming out of Donald Trump's White House and to listen to them. You have to connect with the people of your city. You often talk about how much you love the city of Chicago, how you're proud to be from the city of Chicago. Then really listen to the people that are on the ground experiencing the negative impact of Donald Trump's policies. And what they will tell you is that you should not be wearing a Make America Great Again hat. That's a very extremely hurtful act. And rather than being in the Hollywood bubble and getting into the celebrity and the hype of President Donald Trump and promoting yourself via tweets between you and him, instead, you should be calling out the president for the policies that he's enacted that are hurting the people here in your hometown.
Translation: Kanye, we've put up with your foolishness, and we'll do that so long as you stay on the plantation. You can't leave the plantation and expect us to back you. That's all it's saying. The hurtful policies of President Trump. If the policies were so hurtful, then the economy wouldn't be doing so well. If the policies were so hurtful, what hurtful policies? Please show me the hurtful policies. He's against immigration. I don't know that there are that many real Americans who are pro-illegal immigration. Donald Trump is anti-illegal immigration. Show me a real American who is in favor of illegal immigrants, and I'll show you a progressive who may or may not happen to have U.S. citizenship. There are no hurtful policies against blacks and brown people from Donald Trump. It's a lie. But you can't say that and be down with the black and brown, at least not the movement, the left-leaning. No one in Chicago is defending Kanye West over his support of Donald Trump. Well, I doubt that that's true. Kanye West is a strange individual. That he chooses to support Donald Trump, okay, but now it's a bigger deal than anything else in his life. It's bigger than his inappropriate behavior at awards events. It's bigger than President Obama calling him out of his name. It's bigger than any of that, because how dare you? This is ridiculous. It went beyond this alderman. Pencil Neck John Legend took to trying to reach out privately to Kanye to get him off this terrible track he was on. And E! News caught hold of that, primarily because Kanye said, I'm not going to let you do to me privately anything, and he made those tweets public.
Kanye West shares John Legend's text messages on Twitter. During a Twitter spree Wednesday, Yeezy voiced his support for Donald Trump. Legend reached out to West privately a day later saying, I hope you'll reconsider aligning yourself with Trump. You're way too powerful to endorse who he is and what he stands for. Don't let this be a part of your legacy. You're the greatest artist of our generation. In response, Kanye says, I love you, John, and I appreciate your thoughts. You bringing up my fans or legacy is a tactic based on fear used to manipulate my free thought. But just in case people thought they were on bad terms, Kanye added, John Legend, new single online now.
In what for me is an amazing moment of lucidity, Kanye West called out John Legend for what he was doing. You're trying to bring up my fans and this other stuff, and you're just trying to intimidate me, trying to make me afraid so that I don't do my free thinking. Well, in case you have forgotten it, the reason Kanye West has the career that he has, unfortunately, his erratic behavior goes with it. But nobody had a problem with it until he had something positive to say about Donald Trump. That is hilarious to me. The other thing that's even more hilarious is how come all of a sudden people are paying attention to Kanye West? I don't know of anybody who really pays that much attention. Now, if you're into hip-hop, you may listen to his music, but you're taking your political cues from Kanye West? From John Legend? These are your political thinkers? And then the idea of you're the greatest artist of our time. You're so powerful. Really? I will say that I'm not into hip hop in any way, shape, or form, so that may or may not be a positive or an accurate statement. I can't say. I can say this. Who Kanye West supports or doesn't support isn't going to make a darn bit of difference in the life of the average American citizen who has to get up, go to work, provide for his family, who, whether Kanye West wears or even owns a Make America Great Again hat, doesn't make a bit of difference. I guarantee you whether or not he has that is not going to make a difference to John Legend. John Legend's not going to curl up in the fetal position because Kanye West has a Make America Great Again hat, because he tweeted out support of a president that John Legend doesn't like. It's not going to change John Legend's life. It may or may not affect that Chicago alderman because maybe it'll peel off a vote or two. But in Chicago, I don't think so. Democrats in Chicago, and you know that guy's a Democrat, have other problems besides Kanye West. What he thinks. Know that. But somehow this became a thing, a national thing, where we're not talking about his naked wife appearing in, topless selfies or bottomless selfies or whatever else, putting her assets on display. We're not talking about that. And to her credit, I will give Kim Kardashian West credit for taking the part of her husband while this criticism is going on. So, you know what? He can do what he wants. He's his own person. He can do what he wants. And why are you guys criticizing him for simply having his own set of thoughts? Because black people aren't allowed to have their own set of thoughts. Not publicly. Not when they've been embraced by the pimp squad, the race pimp squad. You can't think as though you would do anything other than be a Democrat. That's the way this works. That's your price of admission. That's your price for staying on top. You have to embrace the Democrat knowledge. Okay, so he's not doing that. By next week, this will probably blow over and we'll be on to something else. But for now, this is a thing because Democrats can't stand to lose one black person if he's influential, even if it's this guy. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I'm going to go after abortion on the issue of rape. Been talking a good bit about that of late. But using rape as a justification for abortion is problematic at best. And it's not even borne out by what really occurs with regard to rape in this country. Rape is a red herring. In 1989, the New York Times reported that just 1% of all abortions in the United States, the reason given was that the woman had been raped and or a victim of incest. 1%. There's a document called the Johnston Archive that was published in 2016, which put it at the same number, 1%. The Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm of Planned Parenthood, had rape at about 1% and incest at less than 0.5%. Operation Rescue, which of course is a anti-abortion organization, put the combined reasons using rape and incest as the reason to get an abortion at less than 1% combined. So what we understand consistently is that bringing up rape as a justification for abortion is a 1% argument. Why am I... There are 1 million babies killed every year from abortion in this country, roughly speaking. 1% of 1 million is 10,000. So in order to make sure that you can kill these 10,000, you want to make sure 990,000 other children die. That's your argument. That's a red herring argument. Well, you don't know how a woman feels when this happens to her. You're absolutely right. Got no problem making that statement. Have no issue with agreeing with that. So, healthresearchfunding.org, they actually looked into that back in 2015, not that long ago. And they came up with 18 profound statistics of rape victims who get pregnant. Here's number 18 of their facts. The percentage of women who decided to keep their child after discovering they were pregnant was 32%. Half the women had an abortion. So 1 in 2, 50% of the women decided to have an abortion. 32% decided to keep the child and raise the child. 6% placed the child up for adoption. And about 12% of the pregnancies ended in miscarriage or spontaneous abortion. What does that tell me? Half of the women to whom this occurred decided that the child is not the one who should pay with his life. So for all of you who are trying to speak for women and talk about how they feel and this, that, and the other, well, here are the numbers. Is that what you think? Because it's not a monolithic thought among women that if I get raped, I'm going to kill the baby. Let me make sure you get this clear. Half of the women decided they wanted to kill the child. I think they're wrong, but they made that decision, and so far it's legal for them to do so. 32% not only kept the child, but decided they kept the baby. They tried to raise the baby. They did not blame the baby for what happened. 6% of the women didn't want the child to die, but they couldn't handle the idea of raising the child for whatever reason. And they gave the child up for adoption. They didn't think the child should die. 12% ended in miscarriage. A lot of things can cause a miscarriage. Emotional trauma can have enough physiological impact to do something like that as well. But the woman did not decide to take an action to kill the child. So it's a coin toss among women. So for all you who are trying to tell someone else, well, you don't understand. Well, for every 100 women this happens to, about half of them understand something different than what you guys do who say we ought to make sure we kill them. See, here's the real issue here. You need to learn to separate the product of conception from the circumstances of conception. Can I tell you this? At the moment a woman is raped, there is no child in existence. So please explain to me why you would hold the child responsible for something that occurred when he was not even in existence. And for those of you who believe that no child actually exists until or less than until they're born, please explain, you even more so, why you would ever hold a non-person responsible for someone else's act. Why should that non-person be punished? Well, they're not really people, but we know they're alive. That part has not even been questioned. They're alive. You have a heartbeat. You have movement. So you can't make that argument. What is your argument? Is your argument that because the woman is going to be terribly upset, that therefore that gives her a right to kill someone? Please explain to me the difference between that and a police officer saying, I feared for my life, therefore I shot. What's the difference? Well, he really wasn't at risk. There's no reason for him to think that way. Pregnancy has been occurring since the dawn of mankind. It is generally not a threat to any woman's life, particularly not in this country with the current state of medical technology. If an unarmed individual is no threat to a police officer, a fetus, a baby in the womb, is even less of a threat to a female. If you're going to be okay with the woman killing a child who poses no threat to her, and you can prove that he doesn't, you better not be talking about law enforcement capping folks who pose a threat to them, because it's all based on how someone feels. If you're going to let emotional upset dictate, then you need to be consistent. I know that bothers people. I don't care anymore. There is one issue in life, and that is life itself. What you do with that life, that's your business. As long as you don't violate someone else, that's your business. Do whatever you want with your life. But whether or not someone gets killed, now that is more of a public affair, not a private one. You do realize the only form of homicide that I can think of in this country where no one is held accountable for what happens, for the blood that is shed, is abortion, which makes women in this country, because we're talking about 1 million folks every year, that's a large number of people. That makes women the most oppressive killers in our society, because there is no recourse for the child. There is none. And there is no one to plead his case. There is no one to answer for his blood. There is nothing. He's just gone. And all of this unilaterally decided by an oppressive individual. Well, you don't understand how she feels. I don't care how she feels. I care whether or not someone is dead. You should be old enough, adult enough, alive enough to handle your feelings or to get help handling them. The way to handle your feelings is not to kill somebody else. That's heinous. The problem with having the position I do is that you actually hold women responsible for their sexuality. And that's something we abandoned back in the late 1960s with the discovery or development of chemical contraception. And we freed the woman from her burden, so to speak. What has that gotten us? It hasn't improved society. It hasn't improved the lot of women. It hasn't done anything positive for the country. And we're still reeling, particularly in the black community, from setting all this irresponsibility loose with no consequence. My prayer is that someone would think enough about this to reel it in. What gives me encouragement is knowing that there are about 20 states or more now who are rolling back abortion, from South Carolina to Texas to Mississippi to Ohio. And Ohio is actually considering in their legislature a complete ban on abortions. There will be no abortions if this is passed in the legislature and signed by the governor. It will be illegal. Now, of course, that's going to get a challenge in the Supreme Court. Well, guess what? That's where you have to go anyway. And all we need is for one justice to retire, a liberal justice, because most of the conservative justices are young enough to hang around, or one liberal judge to pass on. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg is old and sick enough to do that on her own. And then you would have an interesting discussion. Trust me, you will have an interesting discussion, because the tide is turning in America against progressivism and abortionism, or abortion is part of progressivism politically in this country. I hope we get to the point, not where abortion is rare, but abortion is treated like any other form of homicide. Maybe that will remind people of how precious life is. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. And until next week, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.